was a cool, crisp morning the day I had my conversation with Phil. I remember it very clearly. I was walking up the path towards the building and I knew that we were about to have a really critical conversation. So I got that feeling, you know the feeling. So I had some knots in my stomach and my breathing was a little bit shallow and I could feel that the palms of my hands were quite sweaty. I knew what was coming. Phil did not. So I'd been doing a series of 360-degree feedback conversations with this management team. You know the 360-degree feedback? Have you all been part of one of these? So this is where people give feedback about you and your leadership style. So they get feedback from the people who work for you, who work alongside you, and who you report into. So it's a full 360-degree view of your leadership style. And I was doing a series of debriefs on this management team and all of their 360-degree feedbacks. First cab off the rank was Phil. So I went up the stairs and I entered the meeting room and Phil was waiting for me. And we made some small talk and we eased into the conversation. And I talked about the purpose of the conversation today, the parameters, and the process and how it would unfold. And then I slid the report across the desk and I watched as he flicked page after page and I waited and I watched as he finally landed on the final page. Now, this is the page, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of this conversation yet, is where all the comments are. You know, the free-form comments, all the things that people have wanted to say to you about you, but they haven't said it to your face directly for 7 years. So this gentleman had a page full of these comments and they were not too kind, let me tell you. So he gets to this final page and I watch as the colour changes in his face. And I watch as the veins in his neck start popping out and he clenches his jaw. So I wait. And I wait. And I wait for what feels like an eternity. It could have been 20 minutes. I'm sure it was probably only 2, but you know that feeling, like this is going to take forever. And then eventually he looks up at me and then he looks across at the woman sitting next to me. You see, what I didn't tell you was that Phil was a deaf manager and everywhere he goes, every single day of his corporate career, he's had someone with him, talking for him through hands. And so he knew that we were about to have a really hard conversation, him and I. And he knew he would have to have that through a third party. Can you imagine? So we began. We talked about what the report said. He asked me some very straight questions and I answered them to the best of my ability. We talked about the value of the feedback, where people were in terms of their intentions, and what he was going to do going forward. And it wasn't an easy conversation, I can tell you. But surprisingly, at the end of that conversation, Phil said to me, you know, that was probably the hardest conversation I've ever had in my career to date. That was really, really difficult. I'm quite embarrassed, to be honest. I had no idea about the impact I was having on the people that I worked with, and I'm really quite devastated. But I am so glad I know. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. And at the end of that conversation, I marched quick smart into his manager's office and I said, you and I need to have a conversation. Because of course he knew the conversation I just had. He worked with Phil for 7 years. And of course he said, how did it go? How did the conversation go? And I said, you know exactly how that conversation went. As a result of your inability to have a difficult conversation with this man for 7 years, you let this build up, you didn't give him any critical information that he could work with to change, to improve, you set him up. You and I are going to have some difficult conversations about how to have a difficult conversation. And he said, yes, I know, okay, okay. But to his credit, this is the standard response.